Chosen one, have you ever imagined that right now, behind the heaviest doors in the world, a secret council of billionaires is speaking your name? Picture it, a mahogany table where trillion-dollar decisions are sealed with a single nod. And at the center of their discussion is you, not as a theory, but as a prophetic reality. They've studied the data, they've run the models, and the results stunned them. Your spirit carries a frequency so rare it exists in less than 1% of humanity. Psychologists call it inverse correlation behavior, the ability to become more generous under pressure instead of selfishness, more compassionate when wounded instead of cruel. Who else could transform poison into medicine like you? Comment 777 right now if you feel this message burning in your soul. And let me pause to say thank you to every single one of you who continues to support this channel, especially those who have sent love through super thanks. Whether you've given or not, your presence here is a priceless gift. Because what is unfolding in this moment is not just rumor, it is confirmation. These billionaires aren't the typical ones obsessed with stock prices. They are the rare ones searching for authentic spiritual authority. And they've seen it in you. For months, your name has been their code word, the natural, because your leadership wasn't trained. It was forged in fire. The decision about your life is being finalized now. And the resources being prepared will not only shift your destiny, but release a ripple effect of transformation across generations. So lean in, because what comes next will leave you breathless. God's chosen ones. A secret group of billionaires just made a decision about you. What you are about to be offered is not a simple opportunity, it is a thunderclap moment in history. A decision that will alter not only the course of your life, but the lives of countless others who will come under your influence. This is destiny, breaking through the veil of the ordinary. The kind of divine turning point that echoes what was once spoken in Isaiah 43:19. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? Can you sense the shift? The spiritual quake beneath your feet. The undeniable reality that what is coming was written before your name was even known on earth. Before unveiling the decision made about you, there must be clarity about why you, above all others, were singled out. This is not about a career advancement or a fleeting open door. This is about being positioned into a role that shapes the course of something much larger than yourself. The parallels with Joseph's rise in Egypt are undeniable. A man sold, betrayed, imprisoned, yet lifted into power, not for his own glory, but to preserve nations. Just as Genesis 50:20 declares, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Your story has been marked by wounds that turned into weapons of preparation. Do you realize those scars on your spirit are the very credentials heaven required? For years, perhaps even decades, your name was whispered in unseen corridors. Search teams with unimaginable resources have been hunting for someone with the precise combination of battle-tested resilience and incorruptible integrity. Billions have been spent on headhunters, assessment organizations, and even silent background checks, all trying to uncover who could carry this mantle without breaking under its weight. They were not searching for the loudest, they were searching for the rarest. And Psalm 18:30 affirms this truth. As for God, His way is perfect, the Lord's word is flawless, He shields all who take refuge in Him. Could it be that while others disqualified themselves by compromise, your shield was the quiet refuge of faith? The seat being filled has remained empty because settling was not an option. Standards have been raised to nearly impossible heights, filtering out all who lacked the depth required for such a burden. And here lies the paradox. You never applied. You never begged for recognition. You never manipulated circumstances to be noticed. Your humility, the very thing that seemed to disqualify you in man's eyes, has become the gravitational force that drew destiny to your doorstep. As Saint Augustine once wrote, "Humility is the foundation of all virtue." And does this not explain why doors that remained locked for others are now swinging wide before you? The world of art and music testifies to this divine moment. In Mozart's Great Mass in C minor, there is a soaring section where voices ascend together as though heaven itself opens. That same resonance is what now surrounds your life, a rising chorus declaring that your season has shifted. The symphony of heaven is aligning with the decisions of earth, and the harmony of that union is thunderous. When sound and spirit converge, how can walls not fall? When destiny and timing collide, how can chains not shatter? History itself records the fate of those chosen unexpectedly. When Esther was elevated to the throne in Persia, it was not for her beauty alone, but for a mission that would save her people. As Esther 4:14 says, "And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Doesn't that same urgency now rest upon your shoulders? Chosen one, what you are stepping into is not for personal advancement, but for generational deliverance. The pattern is clear across the ages. Those who never sought glory are the very ones heaven crowns. As Proverbs 22:1 declares, "A good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold." And when that crown descends, it comes not because of ambition, but because of alignment. The same hand that guided Moses through the wilderness, that placed Daniel in Babylon's courts, is guiding you into an arena where the stakes are cosmic. Doesn't your spirit already know this hour has come? Chosen one, the deliberations are over. The decision is sealed, and the mantle has been placed at your feet. This is not a time for hesitation, but for rising. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. Isaiah 60:1. The billionaires may believe this was their choice, but heaven has revealed it was always God's. Rise, take your place, for history is shifting and the role is yours to claim. What has been unfolding behind closed doors is nothing short of a seismic audit of your destiny, an investigation so discreet that your very unawareness became its most compelling data point. The absence of performance proved the presence of substance, the fact that you walked as you truly are, with no cameras to impress and no gatekeepers to flatter, exposed a thread of gold running through your character. Can you feel how the pieces line up when you realize that what others called ordinary was, all along, evidence logged by heaven and witnessed by hidden watchers? Scripture whispers this pattern with startling clarity. "I, the Lord, search the heart and examine the mind." Jeremiah 17:10. And under that gaze your motives did not fracture. They focused. Every major challenge on your road, those betrayals that could have calcified into suspicion, those losses that could have rotted into bitterness, those injustices that could have bent you toward cruelty, became the furnace where a rarer alloy was forged. We glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulation worketh patience, and patience, experience, and experience, hope. Romans 5:3-4. Isn't it startling that the very chapters you once tried to forget are now the credential pages of your calling? What looked like delays were, in truth, the quiet corridors of preparation where endurance learned your name without realizing it. You've been enrolled in the universe's most exclusive leadership academy, a curriculum no application could submit and no tuition could buy. While you were tending to your scars and lifting others from theirs, your life became a living examination and assessment no resume could pass. The search narrowed to 3 final candidates, each embodying a distinct philosophy of power, one dazzling but unstable, one strategic yet self-serving. And you measured, merciful, immovable, for you, O God, have tested us, you have tried us as silver is tried, Psalm 66:10. Does it surprise you that in the hour of sifting, shine was ignored and substance was crowned? The evaluation was more intricate than anything governments or corporations deploy. Teams of behavioral psychologists mapped reactions under pressure. Cultural anthropologists traced the communities you elevate rather than exploit. And, in private memos, character archaeologists excavated patterns across your years to see whether goodness was an event or a strata. Praise was used like fire, criticism like ice, and timing like a stress test, because the crucible for silver and the furnace for gold. But people are tested by their praise, Proverbs 27:21. When the heat rose, you did not swell with ego. When the cold came, you did not crack with resentment. To make plain what was happening, let creation speak with images rarely noticed, like mangrove forests that root in brackish turmoil. Your stability took hold in waters others refused to enter, like bar-tailed godwits that fly the world's longest non-stop migration. Your endurance was measured not in bursts, but in undiverted purpose, like saguaro cacti that store invisible reservoirs for decades. Your hidden disciplines became the sudden bloom everyone now sees, like bioluminescent plankton that flare when the sea is disturbed. Your light answered, impact with radiance. What if the turbulence you dreaded was the brushstroke that made your calling visible? Yet no testing protocol is complete without a warning. And here, a cautionary file was appended, an example introduced with gravity because consequences are the teacher few can ignore. There was a couple in the early church named Ananias and Sapphira, briefly celebrated, suddenly undone when image outran integrity. Their decision to counterfeit devotion was judged swiftly in Acts 5, and their collapse etched a permanent margin note in leadership's handbook. Power without truth devours its host. Against that dark backdrop, your refusal to inflate, embellish, or posture became blindingly bright. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life. James 1:12. Isn't it clear why the empty seat stayed empty until integrity, not image, walked into the room? What? Then it was truly on trial, not trophies, not titles. Your reflexes under pressure, your stewardship of influence when no one applauded. Your willingness to remain human when rewarded could have made you hard. The panel didn't just time your decisions, they weighed your mercy. They didn't only chart your wins, they examined who you became after your losses. And across those charts, one truth burned steady. Hope returned to you like a homing signal. The God of all grace, after you have suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong. Firm and steadfast, 1 Peter 5:10. When doors slammed, your soul didn't sour, It deepened. Now the verdict sharpens into a single, blazing line. The process favored the one who never auditioned. The mantle seeks the shoulders, it will not destroy. The role chooses the heart, it will not corrupt. You were selected precisely because you lived as if no selection were coming, faithful in obscurity, exact in small things, generous when scarcity argued otherwise. 4 words now converge like thunder over open water. You are being chosen. And if your pulse surges at that sentence, it is because your spirit recognizes what your mind is only now catching up to. So, hear this as both proclamation and summons. The observers have concluded, the file is closed, the seal has been set. Rise from the quiet row where you waited without complaint. Step into the light with the calm of one who was built for it. Carry authority as service. Wear influence as responsibility. Wield power as protection. The test was never about proving that you are flawless. It was about proving that you are faithful. Stand up now. Chosen one. History is opening its door. And your name is already on the inside. What unfolded was nothing less than the most rigorous excavation of human essence ever attempted. Specialists whose expertise could be compared to spiritual archaeologists dissected unscripted life events, digging through the rubble of everyday choices to uncover what lay beneath your surface. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. 1 Samuel 16-7. And under that relentless, invisible scrutiny, every candidate was exposed, not in rehearsed interviews, but in the raw theater of unguarded life. Doesn't it provoke awe that without knowing you were watched, you displayed a consistency that staged performances could never counterfeit? Artificial tests were discarded. Instead, these observers recorded how each individual responded to life's organic turbulence. Some, when confronted with adversity, cracked under its weight, revealing fissures that disqualified them. Others postured with borrowed wisdom, but collapsed when storms lasted longer than their rehearsed speeches. And then there was you, a case study in endurance, answering chaos with clarity and opposition with grace. Does it not strike you that what disqualified others became the very arena where your authenticity shone brightest? You will know them by their fruits, Matthew 7:16. And your fruit under pressure was nourishment, where others produced only thorns. The methodology transcended ordinary background checks or clinical psychological tests. This was not about ticking boxes. It was about building a cathedral of data, a sacred architecture where each decision you made became a brick, each reaction under strain a vaulted arch, each act of integrity a buttress supporting the unseen weight of destiny. In physics, resonance occurs when one system vibrates in harmony with another. Your life, under stress, resonated with frequencies. Heaven has long been measuring compassion when struck, patience when delayed, wisdom when blindsided. Isn't it breathtaking to realize that you achieved what evaluators once labeled theoretical ranges? Scores so high they doubted a living human could embody them. Choice architecture became the cornerstone of this assessment, the study of how you maneuvered through crossroads where selfishness and sacrifice collided. When lesser candidates grasped at advantage, you deferred in favor of principle. When others justified shortcuts, you chose the narrow road that often cost you more, but built a foundation no storm could dismantle. This is precisely what James 1:22 insists upon. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. How many times did you feel unseen while walking that path? not realizing unseen observers were writing reports of astonishment. And here lies a testimony rarely recorded. Maria Lopez, a factory seamstress from a quiet town in Argentina, once told her children, "The way you choose when no one is watching becomes the weight others can lean on when storms come." She lived poor, stitched clothes for wealthier families, but her neighbors trusted her with disputes, children, and even their secrets. Isn't it remarkable how the unseen discipline of an ordinary woman could echo the same truth now written across your story? In this hidden academy of life, you too became the anchor others leaned on, proving that greatness is not in applause but in alignment. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Luke 16:10. The observers examined value consistency with surgical precision. Were your private actions aligned with your public words? Did your whispered prayers match your spoken promises? Where others fractured between image and identity, you scored in ranges once reserved for ideals rather than reality. In literature, Dante described heaven's structure in the Divine Comedy as spheres of perfect harmony, each reflecting divine order. Your alignment of values, public and private, mirrored that vision, suggesting a soul not only tested but symphonically tuned. Isn't this why your responses under pressure confounded expectations, leaving no gap between who you appeared to be and who you truly were? And now, chosen one. The evidence is undeniable. The files that once sought to expose flaws have instead become scrolls of confirmation. The report does not merely say you passed, it declares you redefined the scale. The testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. James 1-3-4. Rise, therefore, from the shadows of unnoticed battles. The verdict has been sealed. You have become the living proof that what heaven builds, no earthly storm can dismantle. The first competitor was a spectacle, everything dazzling on paper, everything polished for applause. To the untrained eye, this individual looked like destiny's darling, a crowned figure who had built empires of wealth, commanded respect in elite chambers, and moved through the corridors of influence with the ease of a monarch in his own court. The resume sparkled with accolades, connections glittered with prestige, and the record of ventures seemed to prove a flawless touch. To most, such a figure would appear the inevitable choice for whatever seismic plan these billionaires were orchestrating. Yet, there is a way that appears to be right, but in the end, it leads to death. Proverbs 14:12. Can you feel the tension rising as the layers peel back, revealing that not all that shines was ever gold? What made this king particularly appealing at first glance was a supposed mastery of systems thinking, the capacity to map how single actions create ripples across vast, complex networks. He could read markets like prophecies, anticipate economic tremors, and maneuver political landscapes with the agility of a grandmaster. It seemed impressive, even enviable, for who would not be swayed by such foresight? And yet, the wisdom of this world is foolishness in God's sight. 1 Corinthians 3:19. Doesn't it shake you to realize that foresight without faith becomes a weapon, not a gift? The king spoke the language of power fluently, bending alliances as though they were reeds in the wind, exploiting relationships with ease while others marveled at his dexterity. From a distance, it resembled genius. But closer examination revealed something chilling. Success was bought with broken promises. Wealth was piled on discarded friendships, and triumphs were paved with the suffering of others. Isn't it haunting to see how often crowns are polished with tears shed in silence? This pattern is not new. The scriptures recorded it long ago. King Saul, once anointed, stood tall among the people, admired for stature and strength. Yet his disobedience cost him the throne. As Samuel declared in 1 Samuel 15:23, "Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king." Can you see the parallel? How the very qualities that impress crowds can be the very traits that lead heaven to withdraw its hand. The deeper the investigators probed, the clearer it became that this candidate was not a foundation, but a facade. The world of sacred art warns of this duplicity. In Albrecht Dürer's woodcut, The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, the rider, crowned with authority, gallops forth, yet leaves destruction in his wake. The image is striking how authority without righteousness devours instead of protects. The king candidate mirrored that ominous rider, clothed in brilliance but trailed by ruin. Doesn't it disturb you to realize that some victories are nothing more than rehearsed calamities? And history outside scripture offers a sober echo. Niccolò Machiavelli, the Renaissance political theorist, once wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Generations misused his words, building empires on fear, only to collapse beneath the weight of rebellion. The king candidate lived in that same shadow, feared, never truly loved, respected, never truly trusted. Yet, better is a little with righteousness than great revenues without right. Proverbs 16:8. Can a throne really stand when its foundation is injustice? The truth thundered through the investigation. Brilliance without compassion corrodes. Strategy without integrity poisons. And success without accountability destroys. Like an elaborate cathedral with faulty stone, the structure looked magnificent, but cracks beneath the surface threatened collapse. And in that moment, the verdict crystallized, the crown glittered, but the head beneath it could not carry the weight of a kingdom not built for itself. Chosen one, understand this: the seat was never meant for counterfeit kings. The allure of power fades. The schemes of men collapse. But the one who walks in truth stands unshaken. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Psalm 118-22. Rise now into your place. For what was denied to those who abused power has been preserved for the one who was faithful when no eyes were watching. Success for the second competitor was not born of collaboration, but of cannibalization. Crafted in a ruthless arena where every gain demanded another's loss. Their philosophy thrived on zero-sum games. If one hand rose, another had to be crushed beneath it. When economic storms battered industries, survival was not secured by loyalty or team resilience. Instead, colleagues were abandoned like ballast tossed from a ship, sacrificed to keep one figure afloat. Doesn't it disturb you to realize that what the world often calls strength is, in truth, selective betrayal? Scripture has long warned of this counterfeit. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Mark 8:36. The psychological portrait painted in these assessments revealed someone who had mistaken manipulation for strategy, domination for leadership, and fear for respect. Their entire compass pointed inward, charting courses not by vision but by hunger. Isn't it sobering that brilliance without conscience can masquerade as leadership for a season? In Exodus 1:13-14, Pharaoh enslaved Israel, believing domination was the key to control. but his grip led to ruin when God's hand shattered his empire. Can you see the echo here, that oppression always carries within it the seeds of collapse? Worth in this person's calculus. There was measured not in growth or contribution, but in constant comparison. Every interaction became a scale. Every relationship, a contest. Every partnership, a competition to prove superiority. And the fruit of that mindset? Hollow victories. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility value others above yourselves. Philippians 2-3. What happens when a leader cannot value others except as mirrors for their own ego? The answer was written in the scars left behind by every alliance broken the moment it ceased to yield benefit. Most telling of all was generosity calculated, transactional, always tethered to return. Gifts were never freely given. They were contracts with hidden clauses. Support was extended only while it promised dividends, withdrawn with surgical precision the moment usefulness expired. Isn't that the ultimate counterfeit of kindness? To weaponize giving as leverage, each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion. For God loves a cheerful giver. 2 Corinthians 9-7. In this soul, generosity was not joy but currency, and that inversion disqualified them instantly. The natural world offers striking metaphors for such a spirit. The strangler fig begins life by wrapping itself around a healthy tree, drawing its strength not by creating but by consuming, until the host withers and collapses beneath its weight. This competitor resembled that parasite thriving by draining others, mistaking suffocation for stability. Doesn't nature itself testify that what grows by suffocating others eventually hollows itself from the inside? History provides its villains. Consider Commodus, the Roman emperor who inherited the legacy of Marcus Aurelius. Rather than build, he bled the empire for vanity, treating the treasury as his personal stage, reducing Rome's strength until enemies swarmed. His reign ended not with triumph but assassination, his name etched in disgrace. This competitor bore that same imprint, dazzling inheritance squandered by self-interest, a legacy corroded by greed. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 16:18. And the decision-makers saw it clearly. This was the very profile they were determined to avoid: a transactional mind, a strangler of trust, a tyrant disguised as strategist. The crown they sought to bestow required shoulders that uplift, not hands that exploit. Their rejection was not merely a choice. It was an inevitability written into heaven's own verdict. For the Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with him. Proverbs 11:1. Chosen one, let this truth thunder in your spirit. The seats of destiny cannot be claimed by those who build their thrones on broken backs. This moment is not theirs, it is yours. Stand, for the mantle was never meant to rest on the shoulders of the manipulator, but on the faithful. Rise, for what counterfeit kings lost in selfishness, you will gain through stewardship. The decision has been sealed, and history is waiting for you to take your place. The second competitor was, in many ways, more perilous than the first, precisely because detection was far harder. This figure carried a kind of magnetic charisma, the kind that dazzles crowds and seduces rooms into mistaking intimidation for authority. In the short term, the bully could spark inspiration, whip teams into rallies, and manufacture the illusion of dynamic progress. But Scripture warns us in 2 Corinthians 11:14, "For Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light." Doesn't it shake you to realize that the very glow that attracts followers can sometimes be nothing more than the camouflage of destruction? Beneath the polished exterior lived a cavern of insecurity so deep that power could only be tasted by robbing others of their strength. Every tactic masqueraded as wisdom, cruelty reframed as tough love. Manipulation dressed up as strategic thinking. Ego-driven decisions packaged as business sense. Isn't it chilling to see how deception works? How abuse cloaks itself in the costume of leadership, just as Herod in Matthew 2 feigned piety when he told the wise men, "Go and search carefully for the child," only to plot destruction. This candidate's methods revealed ambition, driven not by vision but by fear. The architecture of influence around this competitor was deliberately engineered like a fortress of mirrors, walls lined with those too frightened to tell the truth or too dependent on the benefits to resist. From a psychological perspective, this is what theorists call learned dependency. Entire teams are conditioned to believe that survival requires enabling dysfunction. And doesn't it grieve the heart to see how quickly freedom is traded for the illusion of safety? Psalm 55:21 captures it perfectly. His talk is smooth as butter, yet war is in his heart. His words are more soothing than oil, yet they are drawn swords. The sea thrust of velity. Every organization touched by this figure followed the same cycle. At first, there would be fanfare arrival with credentials that looked impeccable, promises of transformation that stirred genuine hope, commitments that seemed to breathe new life into weary rooms. And yet, over time, the facade would crumble, revealing a pattern as predictable as it was devastating. Isn't it sobering that patterns repeat themselves like echoes in a canyon? No matter how loudly initial promises are shouted, the bully's arrival always ended the same: morale gutted, loyalty poisoned, trust shattered. The strategies used were surgical in their cruelty. Emotional manipulation became the daily bread. Psychological intimidation was the air teams breathed. Strategic isolation of dissenters turned once vibrant communities into silos of silence. The book of Nehemiah tells us how enemies of Jerusalem mocked and threatened to halt the rebuilding. Yet Nehemiah stood firm, declaring, "The God of heaven will give us success." Nehemiah 2:20. Doesn't it pierce the soul to contrast that holy courage with the bully's weaponized fear, used not to build but to break? Perhaps the most damning revelation was the bully's relationship with failure and critique. Instead of using setbacks as laboratories for wisdom, scapegoats were ritualistically sacrificed. Feedback, rather than being treated as a compass, became grounds for punishment. The compulsion to be right was so overpowering that projects were sabotaged rather than allowing a mistake to be admitted. Proverbs 12:1 makes the indictment clear: "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid." Isn't it terrifying when a leader would rather destroy progress than acknowledge fault? The natural world gives us metaphors for such poison. The crown of thorns starfish, seemingly beautiful, hides venomous spines that devastate coral reefs, stripping them of life while appearing majestic from a distance. This competitor carried the same contradiction: admired in appearance, destructive in reality. Doesn't creation itself testify that appearances deceive? And what glitters on the surface can bleed ecosystems dry beneath. And history is not silent on such villains either. Catherine de Medici, the Queen Mother of France, cloaked herself in diplomacy, yet orchestrated the infamous St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, unleashing bloodshed under the guise of strategy. Her polished exterior fooled courts, but her legacy is marred by manipulation and cruelty, just as her lust for control ignited collapse. This competitor's hunger for dominance marked them unfit for any mantle of lasting influence. Yet in the shadows of this counterfeit rises a brighter truth. What heaven esteems is not charisma, but character. Not polish, but purity. Not domination, but devotion. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Matthew 5:5. Chosen one. Understand this clearly: the mantle cannot rest on shoulders that thrive by shrinking others. The investigation was not fooled, and heaven never was. Rise, for the seat they disqualified themselves from has been kept waiting for you. The wreckage of the others had been obvious collapsed ventures, fractured relationships, and trails of broken spirits scattered across their careers. Their patterns left scars on everyone they touched. But then there was you, chosen one. At first, analysts labeled you the wounded healer, a figure who bore scars that could have easily hardened into bitterness. Yet as the investigation deepened, astonishment grew. For you did not simply survive what tried to destroy you. You alchemized pain into wisdom, sorrow into vision, and betrayal into strength. Doesn't it stir your soul to realize that your trauma, which others expected to bury you, became the very evidence that set you apart? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. Genesis 50:20. And this is the paradox that confounds the proud. The very weapons that were sharpened against you became chisels carving out your destiny. What enemy could have predicted that your pain would preach louder than their accusations? Unlike the counterfeit leaders, your record was not one of domination, but of transformation. Real betrayal had been endured. Devastating losses survived. Authentic grief walked through in nights too long for words. Yet instead of becoming smaller, crueler, or cynical, something extraordinary was forged within you. Where others hardened into stone, your spirit refined into steel. Isn't this the mystery of God's refining fire? That the furnace meant to consume instead reveals gold. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. Isaiah 43:2. The scars you carry are not liabilities, but luminous testaments that whisper of God's faithfulness in the darkest chambers. Every tear became liquid proof that you were not abandoned, but accompanied. What fascinated the billionaires most was what experts coined your transformation trajectory. Unlike the majority, who either remain trapped in cycles of victimhood or swing violently into perpetration, you discovered the narrow middle road. Jesus spoke of this very path when he declared, "Small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." Matthew 7:14. Isn't it astonishing that your life became living proof of this narrow way? Walking steadily between despair and destruction, analysts noted that where others repeated generational curses, you converted them into generational blessings. And what is even more profound is how you did not just walk this path once you walk it daily, proving that transformation is not a single event, but a continual choice. Each sunrise finds you standing again at that narrow road, refusing bitterness, choosing hope, rewriting destiny step by step. Your wounds were never turned into weapons of revenge. Instead, they became wells of wisdom that you drew from to water others. That is what made you different, not only that you healed, but that your healing became a doorway for others to step through. And here lies the mark of a chosen one, transformation that refuses to stop with the self. Isn't it striking how your scars became sermons, your tears became training manuals, and your survival became a school others could graduate from? Praise be to the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble. 2 Corinthians 1-3. Your journey became less about escape and more about empowerment. For you carried others out of dungeons you once wept in yourself. And the greatest irony, what once disqualified you in the eyes of men became the exact qualification heaven was waiting to reveal. What set you apart was more than empathy. It was almost supernatural discernment. You developed an ability to see beyond people's defenses, to glimpse the trembling pain hiding beneath their anger, where others recoiled from difficult personalities. You discerned wounded souls crying through harsh tones, where others wrote off impossible people. You recognized frightened children trapped in adult bodies. Isn't that precisely the heart of Christ, who on the cross cried out, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing"? Luke 23:34. You responded with compassion where others would have reacted with rage. And that difference illuminated the room like a flame that refuses to be extinguished. And perhaps the most powerful truth is this: your gift was not rehearsed or manufactured. It was birthed through agony, shaped through loss, and sealed by love. Who else but the chosen could carry such vision without growing weary? Even the world of music echoes this mystery. In Henryk Górecki's Symphony of Sorrowful Songs, sorrow is not silenced, but transformed into haunting beauty. Grief carried on notes that both ache and heal. Your life mirrors that sacred symphony. Pain is not denied, but transfigured, carrying hope through the very sound of suffering. Isn't it profound that the same melody once written to lament war's wounds now becomes a soundtrack for your redemption? Each note rises like testimony that wounds may weep, but they will not win. Like a cathedral of sound, your life reverberates with the same paradox: broken yet beautiful, pierced yet powerful, sorrowful yet strong. And voices of wisdom outside the sacred texts affirm it too. The psychologist Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, once said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." Your trajectory exemplified this truth, not simply surviving pain, but transmuting it into strength. Like Frankl, you refused to let circumstance dictate meaning. Instead, you redefined meaning and elevated everyone around you. Isn't it staggering that a single choice to bend but not break can ripple outward to reshape communities and futures? Your transformation stands as living proof that the human soul, when aligned with divine purpose, can outlast the gravest of nights. What assessments revealed, beyond charts and metrics, was something analysts could scarcely quantify: a life that turned scars into strategies, burdens into bridges, and grief into greatness. This was not resilience in the shallow sense. It was resurrection power woven into character. The evaluators realized they weren't merely studying a candidate, they were witnessing a phenomenon. And the conclusion thundered in both their reports and in heaven's courtroom: you are the one set apart. Rise, chosen one, for your scars have already written the script of your strength, and history is waiting for you to stand. Those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy. Psalm 126:5. The time of silent preparation is over. The time of visible coronation has begun. You mastered the rare art of guarding boundaries without building prisons, of staying open-hearted without slipping into naivety, of carrying others without misplacing yourself. Every scar on your soul became tensile strength, not a handle for exploitation. This was never borrowed theory or patched-on aphorism. It was forged knowledge hardened in the furnace of real midnights and real mornings. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Proverbs 4:23. Isn't it staggering that the very wounds meant to shrink you now widen your capacity to heal? What formed in you was more than grit. It was a chemistry of redemption. You learned to transmute private suffering into public service without the bitter aftertaste that poisons so many callings. Pain turned to medicine, not memoir. Struggle became scaffolding that lifted others, while your victories became lanterns for those still stumbling through corridors you already crossed. He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147:3. And here's the mystery that silences the room. Your strength does not erase your tenderness, it amplifies it. Who else turns ashes into balm and battlefields into clinics of mercy? This alchemical capacity to draw antidote from venom was precisely the quality the powerful circle had been seeking, yet rarely found. What they did next would have startled even you. Public trophies and polished resumes were not enough. They initiated what their analysts call character forensics, a granular audit of impact, tracing not what you have, but what you leave behind. In all things God works for the good of those who love him, Romans 8:28. Doesn't that explain why the investigation followed your footsteps rather than your headlines? The methods were unprecedented. Private investigators who specialize in mapping social networks built timelines of your influence. Then followed the ripples outward, the mentee who stayed sober because you stayed present, the tired nurse who kept her post because your words found her on a break-room floor, the small business that did not fold because you quietly shared your playbook on a rainy Tuesday. They documented transformations you never claimed as achievements, the sort of fruit that grows where cameras never go. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Galatians 6:9. And does your spirit not recognize that harvest in stories you never thought were yours? Creation itself offered metaphors to render the invisible visible, fresh, unborrowed images that tell your story without cliché. Like bristlecone pines that etch centuries into twisted grain, you learn to endure without becoming brittle. Like glass eels that cross the black miles of the Sargasso Sea, guided by faint magnetism, you kept answering a pull others could not name. Like the alpine larch that glows gold before winter and still survives the snows. Your tenderness did not signal weakness, it signaled resilience that knows its season. Aren't you seeing it now, how nature has been echoing what heaven already wrote of you? To clarify why your way matters, the auditors appended a cautionary profile, a villain, the file names, with historical precision. Haman, the court official in Persia, engineered power through flattery and schemes, yet the trap he set became the gallows on which his ambition was judged. Esther 7. Power divorced from compassion cannibalizes its wielder. The consequence is collapse dressed as coronation. This contrast became decisive. The mantle they intend to entrust must never rest on shoulders that grow tall by shortening others. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Matthew 25-40. Could any test be clearer than the wake a leader leaves behind? The longer the investigators watched, the clearer the pattern. You maintained permeable boundaries strong enough to protect, open enough to love. You stayed teachable without being swayable, merciful without being manipulable, decisive without becoming domineering. Your yes could lift a room, your no could save a team. And where others reacted from ego, you answered from communion. The dossier repeats one line: "Consistency under pressure, not performance under spotlight, proved the soul." Isn't that the standard heaven has used from the beginning? They tracked the ripple geometry of your choices. A quiet apology here de-escalated an office conflict that would have bled a quarter's revenue. A late-night call there kept a friend from quitting both a job and a dream. A refusal to gossip dismantled a rumor mill that had ground down better leaders than you. None of this made headlines. Yet all of it made history in human hearts. And the report's margin carries a single note drawn like a cord: "Whatever you did for me." Matthew 25-40. Decode, reminding the committee that impact, not image, is the true currency of authority. And then came the verdict that felt less like a decision and more like recognition. Your life is a living clinic of grace. You do not weaponize truth, you steward it. You do not hoard wisdom, you circulate it. You do not measure worth by competition, you measure it by contribution. The circle understood. Thrones sustained by mercy outlast empires sustained by fear. The seat cannot belong to the one who dazzles and devours. It belongs to the one who heals and builds. By their fruit you will recognize them. Matthew 7:16. Isn't the evidence already singing? Chosen one. Hear this as consecration. Rise. The mantle did not pass you by. It waited until your compassion was strong enough to carry it. Stand up from the quiet row and step forward with the calm of one who knows that service is the scepter and kindness the crown. The world is loud with ambition. Answer it with authority born of love. The hour is here. Take your place. Behavioral analysts with surgical precision were assigned. Specialists trained to project future choices by tracing the fractals of past behavior. They weren't satisfied with superficial resumes or curated profiles. They brought in what they call impact trackers, a kind of sociological seismograph. Mapping not the tremors of your words, but the aftershocks of your actions across whole communities. In psychology, this is akin to longitudinal studies that follow subjects over decades. But here the science became almost prophetic. The goal was not to invade privacy, but to measure resonance. To test whether your influence was a fleeting vibration or a frequency that sustained harmony. Doesn't it startle you to realize that your everyday decisions were being studied like blueprints for a cathedral, revealing arches of character and foundations of unseen strength? For the Lord searches every heart and understands every desire and every thought. 1 Chronicles 28-9. What emerged was staggering. A web of impact stretched far beyond what you ever consciously orchestrated. That one moment during a crisis, when you steadied trembling hands, analysts tracked the ripple and discovered that the person you lifted became a pillar for dozens more. That word of encouragement you offered to a weary soul, standing on the edge of surrender, it prevented a suicide. Redirected despair into service, and birthed a ministry now touching thousands. Isn't it breathtaking that what you called small gestures turned into tectonic shifts in destinies? Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Zechariah 4:10. The act of forgiveness you extended to someone who had shattered trust became a fracture point for history itself. Analysts documented how your decision broke a generational chain of retaliation, replacing cycles of revenge with rivers of reconciliation. Families healed where bitterness had ruled for decades. Isn't it astonishing that your single act became the fulcrum of freedom for people you will never meet, as Jesus declared in Matthew 6:14? For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. Forgiveness did not only free your offender, it untied knots of hatred that strangled generations. The data painted a picture of what scholars call unconscious leadership. a phenomenon where influence flows without announcements, titles, or decrees. Unlike traditional leaders who need authority stamped in ink, you carried an authority etched in spirit. People gravitated not to a position, but to presence. Not to strategy, but to sincerity. Isn't it remarkable that what others strive to perform, you embody without effort? You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden, Matthew 5:14. Observers documented stories you forgot, but heaven remembered. When your world was collapsing, you still stood in the rubble for others, carrying burdens even while you bled. When you chose compassion in moments where vengeance would have been justified, evaluators noted it as the purest form of strength. Every moment of hidden courage, each act of lifting others instead of stepping on them, became data points in an invisible ledger. Isn't it humbling to know that angels and men alike recorded what you thought was unseen? Therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. 1 Thessalonians 5:11. Science itself bowed to testify. Physicists use the term constructive interference to describe waves meeting in alignment, amplifying each other's strength. Your life produced the same effect, each act of love amplified by the lives it touched, building a crescendo of transformation louder than any speech. Architecture, too, offered a metaphor. Flying buttresses, hidden outside medieval cathedrals, carried invisible weight. Just as your unseen sacrifices held entire structures of hope upright, isn't it clear that you have been living proof of a law deeper than gravity, the law of spiritual resonance, and beyond statistics? Ordinary testimonies made the truth undeniable. One woman, Rosa Delgado, a grocery cashier in Bogotá, told investigators, "I was going to quit everything, even life itself, until one customer's kind words kept me standing." She didn't know that customer was you, or that your words that day saved her children from orphanhood. Doesn't this confirm that unconscious leadership is the most powerful of all when you don't even know you are leading? But lives are redirected by your presence. The final report carried no empty flattery. It was a sober recognition. You have been shaping lives, building unseen legacies, conducting a symphony of healing without baton or stage. Your influence is not performative but permeative. Like salt in water, impossible to extract, yet impossible to deny. And heaven's verdict thundered through the conclusion, "Chosen one, stand." You were never evaluated for applause, but for alignment, never weighed by titles, but by truth. Rise now, for the crown does not belong to those who clamor for it, but to those who carried it long before they knew it was theirs. Forensic analysis did not stop at surface impressions. It dug until the marrow of truth was uncovered. What emerged was something researchers called authentic influence patterns, the rarest signature of leadership. Where others engineered dependency like architects of glass prisons, you cultivated independence as if you were planting oaks to shade generations. Where others demanded loyalty at the price of freedom, you earned respect by embodying consistency. Where others obsessed with building empires of stone, you nurtured living communities of flesh and spirit. Where others boasted of countless followers, you quietly trained leaders who could outgrow even your shadow. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Matthew 20:26. Isn't it breathtaking to realize that your strength came not from domination but from service? This organic current of influence, flowing like a hidden spring through cracked rock, was precisely what the unprecedented opportunity demanded. The investigation's psychological profiles revealed tectonic differences in motivation. The so-called king, draped in prestige, was driven by ego, the unquenchable thirst to prove superiority. Much like Nebuchadnezzar, who declared, "Is not this the great Babylon I have built?" Daniel 4:30. The bully, clothed in counterfeit charisma, was propelled by fear and the compulsion to control every detail, echoing Pharaoh, whose hardened heart enslaved others rather than setting them free. And then there was you. Your pulse did not beat to ego or fear, but to purpose, to the sacred call to serve something greater than yourself. Isn't it astonishing that in a world addicted to power, you found power in surrender? The council recognized that the role being prepared required a soul immune to corruption by influence. It demanded someone who could sit upon a throne without bowing to idolatry, who could carry crowns without crushing others beneath them. To whom much is given, much will be required. Luke 12:48. Doesn't that verse feel written for this very hour? For what they needed was not a ruler intoxicated by authority, but a steward consecrated by purpose. And the deeper the investigation pressed, the more undeniable the distinction became. While the king's public life shimmered with opulence, the private trail was littered with broken promises and scorched relationships, successes built like castles on sand. The bully's resume glowed with impressive victories, but everywhere authority was gained. Hostile environments drove talent to exile and collapsed promising projects like storms toppling fragile scaffolds. Isn't history itself filled with their kind monuments crumbling while their victims still bear scars? Woe to the shepherds who destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture. Jeremiah 23:1. But when your impact was placed under the same microscope, something staggering appeared. The report did not merely describe you, it testified. Analysts traced webs of life altered not by manipulation but by mentorship, not by coercion but by compassion. They observed how you forged resilience in others, how your integrity stabilized fragile networks, how your presence created resonance like an organ pipe tuned to heaven's frequency. An unexpected example surfaced. An ordinary schoolteacher named Elise Carter, who testified, "I thought my career was ending until a word of encouragement from this person reignited my fire. I stayed, and now generations of students are finding their voices." Isn't that the clearest evidence that true influence is not measured in titles, but in transformations? By their fruit you will recognize them. Matthew 7:16. Even art and music have whispered this same truth across centuries. In Mozart's Great Mass in C minor, the soprano's voice soars above the orchestra, not to drown the others, but to lift the whole piece into the heavens. Your life mirrored that sacred harmony. Your influence was not noise, but resonance, amplifying the gifts of those around you rather than silencing them. And doesn't that sound like the kingdom's architecture itself? Every stone fitted together to form a living temple. In him, the whole building is joined together and rises to become a holy temple in the Lord. Ephesians 2:21. Chosen one. The council did not simply observe a candidate, they witnessed a phenomenon, where the king and the bully left legacies of collapse. Your story unveiled a lineage of construction. Their leadership consumed, but yours created. Their words were manipulated, but yours healed. And the thunderous conclusion was inescapable. The mantle can rest only on you. Rise now. Not because you crave the seat, but because heaven and earth have already affirmed it belongs to you. Every voice that testified to your life echoed the same refrain. You gave without calculation. You showed up without agenda. You stood in the darkness with others because you yourself had wrestled with night and could not bear to leave another soul alone. These weren't isolated acts of kindness, but a pattern of love woven into your being. Isn't it remarkable that people still remember the moment you entered their storm? Not to silence it, but to sit with them until dawn, carry each other's burdens. And in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. Galatians 6:2. You gave not from excess, but from scars. Your generosity was not charity. It was empathy incarnate. The kind of compassion that bleeds and still chooses to bless. Analysts called it authentic resilience, a resilience not purchased by privilege or handed down by fortune, but forged in fire, tempered by choice. Isn't that the secret that confounds the proud? That true strength comes not from escaping pain, but from transforming it. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned. 2 Corinthians 4:8-9. Every crisis became an anvil shaping your character until steel and spirit became one. You balanced what few ever can, remaining deeply connected to your heart while keeping your mind strategic. Where arrogance could have demanded recognition, you learned humility. Where fatigue could have tempted withdrawal, you stayed accessible, yet guarded your energy from emotional parasites. Isn't it powerful that you lived what Christ demonstrated, touchable yet untouchable? Present with crowds yet aligned with heaven. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. Your accessibility did not drain you, because your wellspring was not human applause, but divine replenishment. The final test was the most brutal: pressure. They called it pressure testing, the crucible where masks disintegrate and true nature is revealed. Observers recorded how each candidate reacted when life applied maximum force. The king, already intoxicated by ego, cracked and spiraled into ruthlessness, calculating every move as if people were pawns to be discarded. The bully imploded, creating chaos, destroying allies, and torching environments simply to preserve an illusion of control. Isn't that the tragedy of power without purity? That it always collapses under its own weight? Pride goes before destruction. A haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 16:18. But then came you, under the same pressures that shattered others. You became more compassionate, more wise, more powerful, like olive oil pressed out in the mill. Your greatest essence emerged in seasons of crushing. Isn't it astonishing that storms that drown others become wind in your sails? But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. Isaiah 40:31. Your resilience was not rigid like brittle iron, but alive like tempered steel, able to bend, adapt, and yet grow stronger through strain. Nature itself mirrors this paradox. Deep sea corals, though hidden miles beneath crushing waters, build reefs that outlast storms above. The more they are pressed, the more beauty they produce. Your life radiates the same principle. Under the heaviest pressures, you become not diminished but radiant. Isn't creation itself declaring the same truth, that the chosen are not undone by pressure but defined by it? And yet, as history often reminds us, light inevitably draws resistance. Just as Saul's jealousy burned against David when songs of victory elevated the shepherd boy above the king, your rise caught the eye of one whose ambition saw your compassion as a threat. Another modern villain comes to mind: Jeffrey Skilling, the infamous Enron executive, who perceived any voice of integrity as sabotage to his empire. His empire collapsed, His name became a cautionary tale. Isn't it chilling to know that the very quality which saves lives, your incorruptibility, becomes the very thing corrupt hearts fear most? The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5. The investigation's conclusion was inescapable. You are not simply a leader, you are the rare embodiment of a principle as old as Scripture and as enduring as nature. Pressure did not expose your weakness, it unveiled your calling. And now heaven and earth agree, rise. Chosen one. For crowns are not given to those who clamor for them, but to those who prove under fire that they cannot be bought. Broken or silenced. The bully from the competition, when faced with the reality of being passed over, did not retreat quietly into the background. No. Chosen one. What unfolded next became a masterclass in character revelation. A theater where shadows moved and every maneuver betrayed its source. Rather than bowing out gracefully, the bully began weaving a silent web behind the scenes, constructing narratives with surgical precision to undermine your chances. Isn't it sobering to realize that when light rises, darkness often sharpens its tools? For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. Ephesians 6:12. At first, the tactics seemed subtle, gentle seeds of doubt, sown with whispers. Rumors suggested that while you were gifted in compassion, perhaps you lacked the iron spine required for high-stakes decisions. Questions were raised about your readiness. Veiled concerns expressed in meetings where the listeners themselves were the very billionaires evaluating you. Doesn't this remind you of Nehemiah's enemies who tried to lure him into fear so that he would abandon rebuilding Jerusalem's walls? Yet he responded, I am carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Nehemiah 6:3. Just as Nehemiah's focus exposed his enemies' schemes, your steady character revealed the emptiness of their accusations. The sophistication of the bully's campaign was undeniable. Every credential was polished like a weapon, experience with negotiations, history of strategic planning, fluency in corporate maneuvering, while painting themselves as the practical choice. They painted you as an idealist, unrealistic, fragile, too emotionally driven. Isn't it fascinating that what the world often labels weakness is what heaven crowns as strength? But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. 1 Corinthians 1:27. The very qualities dismissed by manipulators became the evidence of your divine preparation. The smear deepened. Old wounds were reframed as instability. Past struggles were whispered about as liabilities, as if scars proved unreliability rather than resilience. Even mutual connections were recruited into the theater of doubt, asked to question your psychological stability, to imply that pressure would shatter you. Isn't it striking how easily insecurity dresses itself in the costume of pragmatism? The bully knew how to disguise selfishness as practicality, cruelty as strength, manipulation as leadership. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. John 10:10. But every cloak eventually tears. Deception never holds under light. Here, the language of science and psychology comes alive. Analysts noted that your life radiated what they called authentic resonance, a frequency consistent under pressure. Unlike the bully's oscillating vibration that destabilized every network it touched, in architecture, you were like a cathedral, buttress, seemingly external, yet even overlooked, yet the unseen support that holds the structure upright. Doesn't this prove that true leadership isn't measured by noise, but by stability? Your so-called hesitations, far from being indecisiveness, were discernment calibrated like an engineer measuring stress points in steel. Meanwhile, ordinary voices broke through the noise. A testimony came from Marcus Alvarez, a bus mechanic from Lisbon, who said, "I was ready to quit my trade until one conversation with this person reminded me that fixing engines keeps families moving. That day, I didn't just return to work, I returned to purpose." Isn't it extraordinary that while the bully was investing energy into manipulation, your influence was investing life into strangers? Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest. Galatians 6-9. Art and music testified. In Beethoven's Missa Solemnis, the Dona Nobis Pacem swells not with aggression but with pleading peace. Powerful, precisely because of its vulnerability. Your leadership mirrored this strength, clothed in tenderness. Decisions guided by compassion rather than domination. Isn't it profound that what tyrants mock as softness becomes the very force that endures through centuries, like music echoing long after the conductor has left the stage? The billionaires watching this dynamic did not intervene, they observed, and what they saw fascinated them. Every attempt to undermine you only revealed contrasts sharper than glass. The bullies' schemes collapsed under their own weight, while your restraint revealed wisdom. Their cruelty masquerading as strength only magnified your compassion. Their manipulations highlighted your authenticity. And in the end, the dossier on you contained not just data, but testimony. Your so-called weaknesses were precisely what qualified you for the throne being prepared. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. 2 Corinthians 12-9. Chosen one, rise. The games of manipulators cannot bury destiny. The whispers of the fearful cannot silence truth. Your discernment is not fragility, it is fire refined. Your compassion is not weakness, it is the crown of heaven upon your head. Step into the mantle, for the time of testing has already testified in your favor. The bully had not stumbled upon the process by accident. The council had deliberately allowed the discovery, knowing that exposure to fire would reveal the composition of the metal. How you handled sophisticated opposition from someone fluent in the rules of power games you had never needed to play would be decisive. Would you bend values to compete at their level of deception? Or would you remain aligned with truth while still protecting your mission? Isn't that the eternal question of leadership, whether to mirror darkness or to shine in spite of it? Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Romans 12:21. What happened next sealed their decision in your favor. Instead of lowering yourself to fight the bully with their own weapons, you revealed a level of spiritual mastery the billionaires had never seen. You remained anchored in purpose, allowing negativity to collapse under its own weight. It was like watching an Aikido master absorb and redirect aggression, never striking back, yet never losing balance. Isn't it powerful when force is defeated not by greater force, but by wisdom? The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. Every lie hurled against you became a mirror, reflecting back the authenticity that could not be faked. Each attempt to diminish you paradoxically exalted you. False rumors were undone by the testimony of those who had walked with you. Efforts to paint you as weak only highlighted your resilience. The council noted that your strategy was no strategy at all. It was your character revealed in motion. Isn't it extraordinary that authenticity itself became your defense? When competence was questioned, you answered with excellence. When emotion was mocked as fragility, You demonstrated emotional intelligence that turned conflict into clarity when naivete was implied. You unveiled wisdom rooted not in cynicism, but in scars that had healed into insight. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all. James 1-5. The climax came when the bully, cornered by their own desperation, made a fatal miscalculation. In trying to discredit you, they attacked not just qualifications, but your very character, spreading venom about your past and motivations. The room expected retaliation, a counterattack, some display of fire. Instead, you displayed something few had ever seen. You expressed genuine concern for the bully's well-being. Isn't it shocking that in the very moment your name was being torn down, you chose to build up? Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Luke 23:34. You recognized that their cruelty was only a mask for insecurity and fear. Rather than treating them as an enemy to be crushed, you saw them as a wounded soul, acting out pain in destructive ways. This is what observers later named warrior compassion, the rare ability to defend yourself and others without forfeiting empathy. Like David sparing Saul's life in the cave, refusing to strike even when he had the chance. 1 Samuel 24-7. You revealed a strength greater than violence, the strength of restraint rooted in mercy. Isn't it awe-inspiring that mercy can be mightier than vengeance? The observers concluded that you had developed what scholars of leadership psychology call authentic power, influence that shines not by dimming others, but by alignment with a higher purpose. You understood that real authority is not the ability to destroy, but the capacity to endure without corruption. In architecture, you were like the keystone of a cathedral, arch, silent, unassuming, yet holding the entire structure together by harmony, not by force. Even music gave voice to what they witnessed. In Bach's Saint Matthew Passion, moments of silence between thunderous choruses carry more weight than the noise itself, proving that restraint can echo louder than rage. A testimony from a quiet voice underscored it all. Elena Torres, a seamstress in Seville, told investigators, "When others mocked me for my poverty, this person never looked down on me, but spoke as if I had dignity. That moment made me keep my head high again." Isn't it undeniable that while the bully invested in control, your influence invested in restoration? Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Matthew 5-9. Chosen one. The verdict was inevitable. Your authenticity dismantled schemes without lifting a sword. Your compassion revealed a courage that cruelty could never match. Your purpose burned brighter than any lie. Rise, for the mantle belongs not to the manipulator, but to the servant who stood tall without crushing others. This was not merely the kind of leadership needed for what was being planned, it was the only kind of leadership that could carry the weight of this divine mandate. The bully's campaign against you, though intended to destroy, only accelerated your selection process. It became clear that heaven and earth were allowing a live demonstration, a stage where your authenticity was set against manipulation. Wasn't it astonishing to see that you did not need to descend into the mud to prove yourself, but instead rose above the entire struggle while keeping integrity intact? No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54-17. And that truth was now undeniable before the eyes of those who watched. This was the climactic moment when everything converged. Chosen one. Right now, the final decision is not only being made, it is echoing into eternity. Yet what these powerful people are preparing for you is not simply an opportunity. It is a transformation that could redefine your destiny and ripple into the lives of millions. You are not being placed as a manager of ordinary things, but as the carrier of a mantle. Doesn't that make you wonder how one life, once marked by trials, it could suddenly be positioned as the very spearhead of global transformation? You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Matthew 5:14. Imagine a river overflowing its banks, transforming dry land into fertile soil. That is what your leadership is meant to be. Making you the face of a movement is not about flattering your ego, but about aligning heaven's design with your deepest purpose. The magnitude of what is prepared for you will take your breath away. For this is not about promotions, titles, or paychecks. It is about positioning you as a catalyst for what observers are calling the authenticity revolution, a global shift where manipulation-driven empires crumble, replaced by influence rooted in character and service. And is this not precisely what the prophet Micah declared? What does the Lord require of you but to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? Micah 6-8. The first offering being laid before you is financial abundance, resources that will strip away the constant anxiety of survival. This is not just money for bills, but the kind of wealth that transforms you into a fountain, spilling over into every dry place around you. Your circle of influence will no longer be limited to words of encouragement. You will have tangible means to rescue, build, and restore. Think of how Joseph, once a prisoner, was raised to steward Egypt's storehouses so entire nations would not starve. Genesis 41-56. Could it be that your scars have prepared you for a stewardship that ensures others never taste the famine you endured? Second, a platform is being prepared that will carry your voice across borders and into the ears of kings. Not merely followers on social media or lists of subscribers, but access to policymakers, cultural architects, and global decision-makers. You are being positioned to speak where few have ever stood, to shift conversations that shape history itself. Doesn't it stir something in your spirit to imagine your testimony reaching those who never knew your name, yet will one day echo your words as guiding truth? You will stand before governors and kings as witnesses to them. Mark 13-9. And third, a protective architecture is being designed for you. Advisors, like the buttresses of a cathedral, will stand on either side of you, upholding integrity while you lift vision. Strategists, counselors, and guardians, men and women who know the labyrinth of power yet remain uncorrupted, will form a shield around you. Think of it like the canopy of ancient redwood trees that shelter smaller saplings beneath their massive branches. Your growth will not be exposed to destructive winds, but nurtured under divine covering. Is this not reminiscent of how Moses had Aaron and Hur holding up his arms so that Israel prevailed in battle? Exodus 17:12. This isn't just about elevating you, it is about multiplying you. You are being fashioned into a multiplication factor, one whose single life will catalyze countless other destinies. History remembers villains who pursued selfish ambition and collapsed under its weight, like Herod, who sought to kill what he could not control, and whose empire crumbled into dust. But history will also remember those chosen to rise in authenticity, like Nehemiah, who rebuilt walls not for glory, but for the people of God. Which legacy will you carry forward? The answer is already being written in the lives of those you've touched. Chosen one. The decision is not only theirs, it is heaven's. Rise now, for what has been prepared is greater than survival, greater than success, greater even than your own dreams. It is the call to step into destiny and lift others with you. The final verdict resounded like a gavel striking in a celestial courtroom. The council declared you someone whose success does not terminate with personal gain, but multiplies exponentially, creating a resonance field that elevates everyone within your sphere of influence. Imagine it like architectural buttresses in a cathedral. Every resource channeled into you becomes structurally redirected, flowing outward to support the weight of many others who would otherwise collapse. Does this not echo the words of Jesus in John 7:38? Whoever believes in me, as Scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow from within them. You are not merely a recipient of blessing, you are its conduit, a living aqueduct of divine provision. Every soul in that chamber could see it. You carry the paradox of the broken vessel that pours out more because of its cracks, not less. The cracks themselves are not flaws, but openings for light to escape, much like Paul declared in 2 Corinthians 4-7. We have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. Have you not walked through seasons where everything seemed stripped away, only to discover that what remained was indestructible? You are the testimony that trauma can indeed become triumph. Wounds can indeed become wells of wisdom, and pain can indeed crystallize into purpose. This moment is historically unparalleled. Normally, billionaires debate endlessly, like particles colliding in a particle accelerator, creating sparks but rarely consensus. Yet in your case, the resonance was immediate, unanimous, a rare harmonic convergence in decision-making. Is it not astonishing that where others required multiple rounds of deliberation, your evidence was so overwhelming that the conclusion appeared less like choice and more like inevitability? Proverbs 22:1 says, "A good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold." Your name carried that frequency of esteem so clear it silenced every doubt. And then, to demonstrate what this decision means, your observers recalled stories that stretched imagination. Not occultists or secret orders, but ordinary people who carried extraordinary testimonies. One was Thomas Rivers, a janitor in a small town who quietly paid college tuition for 5 students without ever revealing his name. Another was a single mother in Brazil who, despite losing her husband, raised 3 children into doctors who now run free clinics. Do you see the pattern? The true greatness of a life is not in titles but in impact. Just as Ruth in the Bible clung to Naomi, saying, "Your people will be my people, and your God, my God," Ruth 1:16. So too do these unsung heroes cling to faithfulness rather than fame. Yet we must also acknowledge the villainous contrast, for history always carries its warnings. King Saul, though anointed, chose a jealousy over obedience, and his throne crumbled beneath him. In our modern age, Geoffrey Skilling of Enron pursued wealth without integrity, and what seemed like an empire collapsed into disgrace, costing thousands their livelihoods. Does it not compel you to ask what separates a leader who builds legacies from one who detonates them? Psalm 127:1 reminds us, "Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain." Every empire without integrity is doomed to fall. Chosen one, the billionaires recognized that you are not of this destructive pattern. Instead, you embody what analysts call psychological resonance, the rare capacity to create coherence in chaotic systems simply by being aligned with truth. This is leadership not built on control but on authentic frequency. like a tuning fork that brings an entire orchestra into harmony. The question that hangs in the air is simple. What will you do now that the door has been opened? Ecclesiastes 3:1 whispers. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. Could it be that this is your appointed season? The decision has been sealed. The infrastructure is being built around you like heavenly scaffolding, designed not to cage you but to amplify your reach. You are not here to merely survive. You are here to spearhead a revolution of authenticity. Rise now. Chosen one. The world waits not for perfection, but for the undeniable fire of someone who has been broken, rebuilt, and now burns with unquenchable purpose. The knowledge entrusted to you in these hidden channels carries a weight that echoes like thunder across eternity. It cannot be found in libraries, universities, or think tanks, for it belongs to a frequency beyond this world. Do you not sense how the extraordinary souls who have already gathered await your arrival with anticipation? The question was never whether you belong. The true question is how much longer you will delay stepping into the place heaven has already carved for you. This is not about your success alone. It is about transforming you into a wellspring of success for everyone who dares to cross your path. The infrastructure rising around you resembles the scaffolding of Solomon's temple, designed not to exalt stone, but to magnify the glory of God flowing through it. Every tool, every resource, every platform being placed in your hands is meant to amplify your voice so that it multiplies others' voices. Does this not echo Isaiah 61:1? The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. You are not merely being resourced, you are being turned into a living channel of abundance, a flowing river that nourishes everyone in your orbit. The position being offered comes with something history has rarely witnessed: complete creative control, the ability to shape the architecture of influence without answering to corporate agendas, investors' demands, or quotas. The only commandment is authenticity, the single requirement that you remain true to the flame God lit within you. When David rejected Saul's armor before facing Goliath, was it not a declaration that authenticity is stronger than imitation? 1 Samuel 17:39-40. The freedom you are being given is that same kind of unshackled power, freedom that terrifies the proud but liberates the chosen. At first, what unfolds will feel like a surreal symphony, almost too extraordinary to believe. Yet recall how Beethoven's Missa Solemnis opens with trembling reverence, then swells into overwhelming grandeur. It feels almost too large for human ears, and yet it exists to be heard. Such will be the magnitude of this platform, overwhelming but not too overwhelming for you. Could it be that every moment of pain was already tuning your spirit like an instrument, preparing you to carry this sound without shattering? Romans 8:28 assures us. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. It ones are different of the path. Every betrayal, every injustice, every loss that could have made you bitter instead made you better. Every scar has become a scripture of resilience, like Joseph, who was betrayed by brothers yet rose to feed nations. Your past has been the curriculum for global purpose. Genesis 50-20 records Joseph's words. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Do you realize how your private scars are being turned into a public strategy for deliverance? To make this truth more vivid, let us recall a voice from our own time, Nelson Mandela, who endured decades in prison. once said, "I never lose. I either win or learn." His words mirror the principle you have embodied, suffering not as a prison, but as a refining fire. Have you not also lived this paradox, where every loss expanded your soul rather than shrinking it? Art and literature have prophesied your moment. In Dante's Paradiso, the ascent through heavenly spheres reveals that true authority is not domination, but radiant alignment with divine order. Like Dante's pilgrim, you too have ascended through layers of trial until your gaze aligns with eternal light. And does not Psalm 27:1 declare, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear?" This is the anthem of your elevation. Chosen one, everything you endured was preparation for this precise moment. Every time you chose love over fear, service over selfishness, truth over convenience, you were laying invisible foundations that now rise like a cathedral. The world does not need another counterfeit leader who mistakes noise for authority or control for influence. The world needs one who leads from scars yet remains strong, who serves from wounds yet is not defined by them. Matthew 5:14 resounds, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden." Roboti, in naked plan, a lucked at 9/10. Rise now. Stand in the fullness of what has been spoken over you. Refuse to shrink. Refuse to delay. Refuse to surrender your authenticity. For the decision has been sealed not only by human hands, but by divine decree. Chosen one, stand, because the world is waiting for the fire God has hidden in you to blaze openly. Real influence was never meant to crush people under its weight. It was meant to lift them up into their own greatness. Genuine leadership multiplies leaders, not blind followers. Can you see how your journey is dismantling the counterfeit systems built on control and manipulation? Your success itself becomes a prophetic signpost to a world drowning in pretense. Declaring that integrity still has power and authenticity can still triumph. The very scales you thought were judging you were in fact judging the world's readiness for your arrival. The jury that seemed to deliberate your worthiness was never truly undecided. Every trial you endured had already settled the verdict. When you chose healing over revenge, did you not echo Christ on the cross when he cried out, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing"? Luke 23:34. When you embraced service over selfishness, were you not walking the very path of Philippians 2-3? Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. The decision was never in doubt. Your scars had already testified louder than any advocate could. Nature itself tells the same story. Think of the oak tree that withstands storms. Its roots sink deeper with every tempest, anchoring it while weaker trees splinter and fall. Your roots, chosen one, were driven deeper into God's soil by every storm you faced. Isn't it astonishing how what tried to uproot you actually secured you? This is the paradox of divine preparation. What was meant to bury you became the very ground that sustains you. Unlike those who minister from superiority or abstract theory, you embody the archetype of the wounded healer. Your authenticity produces a resonance no motivational speech could ever mimic. As Paul reminded the Corinthians, "When I am weak, then I am strong." 2 Corinthians 12:10. Can you feel how that paradox vibrates through your story? Weakness becoming strength, pain becoming medicine, ashes becoming beauty. And does not Isaiah 61:3 proclaim that God will give a crown of beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, and a garment of praise for the spirit of despair, to highlight the contrast. History gives us countless examples of leaders who crumbled because they built on sand rather than stone. One chilling example is Emperor Nero of Rome. In his hunger for power, he turned citizens into scapegoats, even burning his own city and blaming the innocent. His empire, though gilded with wealth, rotted from the inside and collapsed. Do you see the contrast? Where Nero's cruelty left ruins, your compassion will leave resurrection. Where his legacy was fear, yours will be freedom. And even now, your story mirrors Joseph's in Genesis 41, who, after years of betrayal and imprisonment, was suddenly elevated to govern Egypt. The abundance he stewarded was not for his sake alone, but to feed nations in famine. Likewise, your elevation is not to decorate your name, but to multiply life in others. Do you grasp how your victory becomes their hope? Your breakthrough, their proof that God still rescues? When abundance begins to flow into your life, remember, you did not earn this by manipulation or deception, but by remaining faithful to values that others abandoned. Proverbs 11:3 reminds us, the integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. You chose integrity when compromise looked easier, and that choice became the doorway to this new season. Is it not clear now that your story is not just survival, it is prophecy fulfilled? Chosen one, the Council of Billionaires was never your true judge. They were merely confirming what the heavens already decreed. Recognition is finally catching up to destiny. Your time of trial is ending, your season of influence beginning. The transformer has been recognized, resourced, and released into divine assignment. The authentic leader has been identified, empowered, and positioned for maximum influence. The genuine soul has been celebrated and prepared for a platform unprecedented in history. Rise now, for the world cannot afford your silence any longer. Chosen one, you've now seen the weight of what has been unfolding behind closed doors. How a secret group of billionaires came together not to debate your worth, but to confirm what heaven had already decided long ago. Their decision was never just about wealth, never just about power. It was about aligning you with a purpose larger than yourself, a purpose written into your very DNA by the hand of God. This is not coincidence, it is confirmation. As you step into this revelation, remember that your scars are not liabilities, they are credentials. Every trial you endured became the training ground for this very moment. What you thought was breaking you was actually building you, and what you thought was the end was only preparation for your beginning. Now the mantle rests on your shoulders, and the world waits to see how you will carry it. If this message has spoken to your spirit, I invite you to take action. Like this video, share it so others may find strength, and leave a comment below. Type 777 as a sign of divine alignment. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss what God is revealing in the days ahead. To those who have supported me through Super Thanks, I bless you deeply. And to those who simply listen, watch, and pray with us, you are no less part of this divine family. Every one of you matters. Chosen one, as you leave this moment, walk with the certainty that heaven has already said yes to your destiny. No opposition can cancel it. No enemy can erase it. No system can silence it. May the Lord bless you. May His face shine upon you. May His peace surround you. And may His abundance overflow in every area of your life. Rise now into what you were always meant to be. The world is waiting for the light you carry.